For this other short video, I'm going to show you how you might set up a quick base mesh for your pepperoni pizza. Basically, I'm going to be doing just a cylinder to create the crust shape, and you can see how the crust, obviously there's lots of different kinds of pizzas, some that are thinner, some that are thicker. I'm just going to go with something kind of like this. The idea being that it's got a little bit of a sort of puffiness to the crust, and then you can see it sort of dips down a little bit, and sort of you have this sort of valley, flat valley for all the toppings. All right, so let me push that over to the side. Start with a cylinder, and I'm going to try doing this entirely in Maya, but you can obviously do this in Blender too. You're welcome to do the sculpting part in ZBrush or something, but I'm going to try and do everything again in Maya just to get that damn mesh ready. All right, so we go ahead and just scale that down to sort of the right thickness of the crust itself. Clearly, this is way too low poly. We don't have enough subdivisions to make it look nice and round. So I'll go to axis subdivisions, and I'll go generous, 64. Seems good for something like this. You know, even for a project like this, if you don't really care, you can just go nuts and do like 128 if you want. Sure, why not? Okay. So that's probably about the right thickness. I think just to be really kind of proper about the whole thing, I'm going to take the pivot point and move it down to the bottom of this thing. And then I'm just going to take the whole thing and move it up. So now the bottom of the pizza is sitting on the grid rather than it's sitting halfway inside the grid. This is just good game practice. Theory being that if you are creating a pizza that's going to be used in a game, this is not getting away from texturing, but if you're going to be using this in a game, if you want to place a bunch of pizzas on a countertop, you don't have to raise every single pizza up a tiny fraction of an inch to get it to sit on the counter as opposed to inside the counter. Okay, so now that I've got that set up, I'm going to go ahead and modify freeze transformations. That'll allow me to do a nice bevel here. So I'm going to go to edge selection. I'll try let's try this one to start. So I'll double click on that edge loop, shift right click, back again, bevel edge, there we go. Then I can add in some extra segments, maybe like 3 to start to get it rounded. Maybe I'll try increasing that fraction a little bit to start to kind of get it a wider, perhaps. Well, I'll try that. That seems fine. Okay. So now that we've got that overhang, kind of for that sort of top part done, we also have that bottom part to worry about. Let's also, maybe I'll just scale this in a little bit, something like that. Then I can go ahead and maybe I'll just do an extra bevel for that, just sort of create a little something like that. I don't have to worry so much about the underside, it's really the top part. All right. I'm also going to go ahead and just in object mode soften all the edges so we get a nice look. All right, now I've got this set. I don't have that sort of valley yet. So I think what I'm going to do is go to edge selection. I'm going to grab just this one and scale it in a little bit so that I have sort of where the valley is going to begin. And I'm going to sort of pull it down to get that valley. You can see when I did that, I end up with a little flat sort of bit right there. I can just say multi-cut and just pop in a couple extra edge loops. And I can just sort of scale and move those to sort of get that roundness back again, something like that. Okay. Now, this whole thing has in there. It's too even, it's too perfect. This is where sculpting is probably going to come in, I'm just wondering whether it's also going to be nice to add at this stage a little sort of variation to the sort of height of that sort of valley. So if that's going to be the case, I'm going to go ahead and once again scale this thing way in. You'll see why I'm doing this in a second. Then with that selected, go ahead and bevel that edge. And you see when I bevel an edge that doesn't have like a sort of like not on a corner, but it's sort of on a flat surface, it basically just splits it. is quite nice because then I could say add in extra segments like that. This is going to give me some extra sort of stuff to work with. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to again just add in maybe an extra there to give myself a little better distribution. All right, that should work just fine. So that's what I've got here. Now I'm going to start sculpting this thing right in Maya. So the sculpting tools in Maya, which is back in object mode, you can find that under the mesh tools menu. And you'll see there's something called sculpting tools. And I'm going to go ahead and just go to that and tear off that sub menu. So I have this available. Although my guess is I'm going to be mostly just using this grab tool. So with the grab tool, make it active. You can see the sort of grays out the model a little bit, and we have this range. This uses the same hotkey as something like select, where I hold down the B, it's an AB, then hold down the left mouse button. Drag left to right to increase or decrease that range. So for instance, what I can do here is start in top view and just sort of gently, not with just nothing huge, gently, you can see this is very fast to start creating a little variation so it doesn't look like a perfect round, circle, which just doesn't look natural. Remember, the human theoretically is shaping this pie, okay? Again, just like just some subtle variations in the top view, and we can see, great. Okay, go back to say this view. Then I could start to change it in other views. So you can see I'm just up, down, it's nothing fancy, just like nothing crazy, just some subtle shifts just to get the whole thing looking natural and pizza-like. Now, the other thing, as I said, I was thinking I was just going to use the grab tool, but I might mess around with again, I don't use these tools very often. Usually I'm sculpting in another thing like either ZBrush or Blender. I'm looking for something like an inflate, but maybe it's this bulge tool. So the way this should work is if I start to, you can see, draw, it's pretty extreme. One thing to note about these tools, if I go to their options, this little icon right there, you can see that there's not just a size, but a strength. I'm going to see what happens if I bring that way down. And you're going to see, like when I bring that down to 1, that's a much subtler value. How about 0.1? Now, see how much subtler that is. Pins are almost always going to be better for something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and make that smaller in this way. This is all pretty extreme. Start to create a little sort of like puffiness, like almost like bubbles. And this is sort of quickly showing me that I have either, either the strength is too high or I don't have enough subdivisions and enough geometry. What I'm doing here, by the way, to sort of tone down those bubbles is if you hold down the Shift key at any point, doesn't matter what tool you're working with here, Shift will just sort of smooth and relax. See, so now I can sort of go back and forth a little bit. I can sort of like puff out some sections. So you get the idea. I mean, I don't want to go too in depth here, but this just gives you an idea of how to prep your whole pizza mesh. And then again, hold down Shift, smooth out, make those not quite so extreme. See that? Still get sort of this subtle puffiness or bubbles, whatever it is. And there you have it. So then the last step is to UV this thing. This is actually going to be very easy to UV. So I'm going to get out of this tool by saying just running the select tool. So there's that default mesh. Over here to UV, camera-based projection. That's a good starting point. We just close that little dialog box up. Let's take a look at the UV editor. Then I'm going to go to the object mode, UV, 3D Console UV tool. And you should just be able to sort of split this top and bottom. Just find like that right there. You can see I've got a top and bottom. Over here, I'm just going to go ahead and select both shells. Shift right click, unfold, unfold. Then they're sitting right on top of one another right now, so arrange and layout. And now you can see I've got a top and a bottom. Now, just to let you know too that if you're really doing this right, one of two things would happen. Like, for instance, if you think about the cloak, remember the cloak was a very tall, uh, oriented sort of shape. You could actually think about using a similar size texture, a rectangular texture, since it's going to be very hard to fit these two circular UV shells into a square. Another option is to take the bottom shape, which is really not very important. In fact, you probably will barely see it. It's mostly that top that's important. And I'm literally going to scale that thing down, sort of pop it somewhere like up in the corner here. And it can be real small. This is very common when not very important parts of a mesh have small UVs, or should I say a lower texel density. And then I can say take this larger one and just manually scale it up, and it just needs to make sure to fit it inside the 0 to 1 space here, so I can't go over in either case. So I just have to sort of eyeball this. I'm not going to be perfect, but then you can see that's going to give me a lot more texture resolution on the top, which is the most important part anyway. And then I just want to double check that this thing doesn't overlap and also doesn't go into the 0 to 1, past the 0 to 1 space. And so that's going to texture nicely. All right, so that should be a good mesh for texturing in Substance Painter.